Transport and broadcasting are two of the areas the government is in the spotlight over at the moment. Let's talk about both of those things now with the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, who joins us for her weekly interview. Good morning to you, Prime Minister.
Good morning.
If I could start with the transport and the proposal, and I know it is just a proposal at this stage, but for a 20 cent a litre, that will be the cumulative effect on Auckland motorists. I thought that the government position was no new taxes in the first term.
Yeah, and good to split that out, Guy. And as you say, regional fuel tax is something that will affect only Aucklanders, and that's where we've talked about enabling the region, Auckland, to bring in something roughly around 10 cents. What we're discussing here in the government policy statement, this is what every government undertakes. And excise, and what we do with excise, is routinely discussed in these statements. And we've said, and we're consulting on, roughly around 3 cents per litre for 3 years in order to make the step change that we need across the country.
Kicking in when?
Well, we're consulting on that now, and that'll go through till July, and then any potential changes will flow on sometime thereafter that.
So it could come in 2019?
It could come in 2019.
So how is it keeping faith with your promise to have...
No new taxes?
Yeah.
Excise, as I say, is routinely part of the government policy statement. Under the last government, for instance,
so
motorists...
it's not a tax?
It's certainly not new, given it's increased 17 cents in the last 9 years. And in fact, under the last government, their proposal, because of their roads of national significance, would have led to 10 to 20 cents extra. We've rejected that. We do not believe motorists should be paying that amount.
Okay.
And we also reject the plans that they had.
Yeah,
Indeed, but the reason I make that point, Guyan, is because excise is routinely, as part of these government policy statements discussed, we're bringing back down some of the expectations that existed across land transport because we didn't agree with their plans. They were costly and didn't benefit enough people.
Just to be clear, this regional fuel tax isn't a tax?
It's an excise, yes, but it's not new. We discuss them every government policy statement.
So you believe that it keeps faith?
It's not regional, Guy.
You believe that it keeps faith with the promise not to introduce new taxes because it's an excise, not a tax. Is that the argument?
Because we said we're not bringing anything new in. Regional, we canvassed a regional fuel tax for Auckland. This is not a regional fuel tax. It's excise, which, as I say, every government, every time we do a GPS, discusses what happens with it. This is now what we're consulting on and asking the public if they agree with the priorities we've set.
Have you done any assessment on the impacts on lower income people of introducing what in Auckland would be a 10% per litre increase in the cost of fuel, wouldn't it? Like $2 a litre roughly, right, at the pump?
we know that.
And if you're adding 20 cents a litre, that's 10%. So adding 10% to your fuel bill, that's going to have an impact if you're driving in from South Auckland.
Roughly on average, if we're talking across the country, roughly on average, we're looking at $30 per year. But we're also looking at, for Aucklanders, what specifically we can save them as well. Auckland knows it's a basket case when it comes to transport. We know that we need to improve the options that motorists have, and at the moment they don't have options. You know, as ask any Aucklander about your options coming in from the west and the south, people choose to own expensive cars, and when I say expensive, it could be, a second-hand imported vehicle, because that is their only transport option. We need to give lower cost options, and that's what this is about. The second thing I'll say, Guyan, is do we know that low and middle income earners are doing it tough? Yes. That's why the first thing we did when we came in as a government was give, on average, to 384,000 families an average of $75 a week. That comes in July. We know we need to ease that cost of living, but we know we need to start investing to give them transport options too.
Just on that point, though, if you're spending $100 a week on petrol, which wouldn't be uncommon if you were driving in, say, to the city from South Auckland every week, and you've got a 10% rise in your fuel costs, then you've got $10 more a week in petrol, or $500 a year, which is quite a lot of money, isn't it?
Guy, we have to look at the alternative. The alternative is do nothing. and to have that family continue to spend that amount of money without having the option of ever opting for something cheaper, something more efficient, and something, of course, that improves the environment and makes it quicker for them as well. We have to start making these big calls, and they are big calls. They're hard calls. I'm not denying that. But unless we start investing, we will never save those families money in the long run, and we should and we have to.
Okay.
They should have the option of a bus. They should have the option of rail. At the moment, they have neither in many places.
Okay, let's switch to Claire Curran and the broadcasting issues that are at play and have been for the last few days. Do you retain confidence in the Minister, Claire Curran?
Yes.
Is she doing a good job? She's
admitted to making mistakes. She's apologised for the initial state which this stems from. She was asked a written question as to the meetings she'd had with Radio New Zealand. She listed those, but did not include a coffee she had with Carol Hirschfeld. She should have included that coffee. She didn't consider it official. She thought of it as informal. She agrees she was splitting hairs. She apologised, corrected the record.
Did she try to prevent the chairman of Radio New Zealand, Richard Griffin, from appearing at the Select Committee, as has been reported over the last 24 hours?
Yes, and I've asked the Minister directly about this because this is an important point. Radio New Zealand were due, as I understand, to appear to a Select Committee to correct their record because of statements they'd made last Thursday. When they, for logistical reasons, were unable to make it, the Minister, concerned as she was that correcting the record, given she'd been held to account on that too, sought to give advice that they could do it in writing if they were going to take another week in order to be able to physically appear. She was never able to contact them directly, left a message. I understand Richard Griffin's contacted her and said, look, we're already scheduled to attend Select Committee, let us know if that's a problem. She never responded.
So the tenor of the reporting is that she would have far preferred a written statement to correct the record so that Richard Griffin didn't appear before the Select Committee and with the opportunity of him being questioned by MPs, because that could be embarrassing in turn for the Minister, couldn't it?
No.
Are you sure that that is not the case?
Look, Guy, they were already meant to appear last Thursday. It was only after they missed their appearance that she contacted them and passed on advice that if they were worried about correcting the record immediately, they could do that in writing. I think that's valuable advice to share. Would it have been better shared by someone else? Yes. Look, in hindsight...
So she made a mistake there?
Oh, given the context. Look, she's been criticised for not having a direct relationship with the chair and now criticised for having that direct relationship. In the context...
No, but here's the thing though, right?
In the context, I agree it would have been a better look had someone from the clerk's office passed on that advice. Is that a sacking offence? No.
So there are two strikes there, right? She didn't disclose the meeting, and you're saying she was wrong to directly call Richard Griffin.
No,
is she on a last warning?
Look, it's all about how you correct your mistakes, Guyon. And if we drill this down to what we're really talking about, it was a cup of coffee she should have put in a written question.
Well, if it was that trivial a deal, why has Carol Hirschfeld resigned from Radio New Zealand?
And that's because of Radio New Zealand's operational issues, and it's a matter for them. She has corrected the record and apologised. Of course, given that was what she was held to account on, she didn't want Radio New Zealand waiting a week to do the same. She offered them advice on how to do it quickly. Under the circumstances, yes, it would have been better for someone else to provide that advice. But again,
did someone else provide that advice?
My confidence.
Did Paul James, the Ministry of Culture and Heritage CEO, did he phone Richard Griffin too on this?
Claire Curran contacted him to pass on the same message because she was unable to reach Richard Griffin. And
so have you talked about that? Because he's your CEO in that sense too of your portfolio,
he reports to multiple ministers.
Including you?
Indeed.
Have you talked to him about this issue?
No, why would I?
So here we have the Minister who's also the Minister for Open Government slating in her diary a meeting with CH, which is Carol Hirschfeld, doesn't disclose it when asked what meetings she had, doesn't go public when RNZ, Chairman and CEO inadvertently lie to a Select Committee,
That's incorrect. Guy, I'm going to correct you on two things there. The very day she had the coffee, she was her office was asked by a journalist if it happened, and she absolutely acknowleded it was.
She didn't disclose it when it was asked by the opposition.
In a written question, and I've explained what happened there. She agrees it was wrong. When she heard Radio New Zealand give advice, her office corrected it the same day to let them know the advice was incorrect. But Guy, I want to come back to this because ultimately I've been asked about this a few times by people to explain what's going on. Because they don't understand, because in the bigger frame of things, this is a government focused on issues like fixing transport. In the same week that I've been talking about a cup of coffee at Astoria, we announced the building of up to 3,000 houses in Auckland. Yes,
so this isn't a big deal at all?
People will
Not a big deal?
No, what I'm saying is people will make mistakes while I'm in government. They will.
Yeah,
this won't be the first and it won't be the last.
No, but what are the consequences of those mistakes?
Let me finish my sentence, Guy. What's important is how they correct them, that they correct them as soon as they can, and what we do to make sure that the record stands. But ultimately, I still stand by what we are doing as a government. We are focused on the important matters and correcting our mistakes, and that's what we've done.
Thanks very much for your time. I do appreciate it. That is the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and it's 22 minutes now to 8.
And coming up before 8 on Morning Report, we speak to Black Caps coach Mike Hesson about his team's series victory.